And now, marine weather around Alaska. Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather outlook for Wednesday and Thursday. But first, we'll look at the sea ice. And we've had a prolonged period of east-northeast winds along the Arctic coast, northwest coast here that opened up a lot of polynyas. And then winds have since reversed more south and then southwest now along the northwest coast. And these openings have refroze, but again, they'll begin to close off once more. But it's been a very active stormy pattern that's impacted the western and northern portion coastal areas of the mainland here for the past couple of weeks, going all the way back through the early holidays. And looking at the extent of the Bering Sea ice, it's pretty much there from around St. Matthew northward. Notice, though, across Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay, the ice extent is rather limited. There have been a lot of mild air, windy conditions, wave action that served to melt and break that ice up. It may tend to start to refreeze and redevelop in the coming week here through the end of the month, because we are going to see some colder temperatures settle back in across areas of the west coast here before the end of the month. Looking at the weather pattern overall, here's a bit of a change. Big high pressure taking shape later tonight, early on Wednesday morning. Center of high pressure will be up near 1050 millibars. There's another center back here toward northwest Canada. And we're just going to have this elongated ridge across the mainland on Wednesday into Thursday. It's going to tighten the pressure gradient from the northern panhandle across south central areas, especially south of the Alaska Range. And when you have this setup, it's going to create some very strong gap valley winds, ridgeline winds as the cold drainage out of, say, the Copper River Basin or through the Matanuska Valley there will really pick up. Also, Taku winds could develop Wednesday afternoon and evening there in the Juneau-Douglas areas as the cold air coming in off that snow pack above Juneau will enhance the wind flow. So by Thursday afternoon, we have this elongated ridge, the center of high pressure. Wednesday night, Thursday morning will be up around or just above 1050 millibars, with the ridge extending westward to just off of the Yukon Delta. And overall, that's going to bring a fair amount of clearing to the southern mainland. In the north, this front will brush the Arctic coast north slope with some snow showers and blowing snow during the day on Thursday, but otherwise southern areas seeing a lot of clear skies and some very windy conditions in certain locations. So here, with the outflow winds on Wednesday, just within Lynn Canal, north winds 35-knot gales, gusts to 45 knots. We have winds in the Juneau vicinity Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening could gust upwards around 50 knots or 60 miles an hour. Further south, north winds 15 knots around Ketchikan, Metlakatla. The outer coast, some of the strongest winds, Sitka on up through Yakutat, 40 to 50 knot east-northeast winds, and waves within 15 nautical miles of shore running anywhere from 8 feet here in the lower southern portion of the coastline to in excess of 10 to 14 feet there outside of Yakutat. And then for Thursday, we still have brisk winds, 25 knots here down toward the south end, Dixon Entrance, 6-foot waves, 35 knots, Stevens Passage, 40 knots, Lynn Canal with waves 7-8 feet there in the middle upper channels. The outer coast, 25 to 40 knot northeasterly winds, waves running generally 9 to 11 feet. In the northwestern Gulf, here the area just west of Cape Suckling to Gravel Point, there is a hurricane force wind warning on Wednesday. We're expecting gusts outside here of the Copper River Delta, 75 miles an hour. Locally, even higher gusts could occur, upwards to 100 miles an hour in this type of setup because there's cold air draining out of that Copper River Basin. 50-knot north winds within the broader expanse here of Prince William Sound, 13-foot waves. Offshore the Kenai, 45-knot north winds and 40-knot winds out of the north there. Lower Cook Inlet with waves as high as 14 feet. For Thursday, not quite as windy. We still have brisk winds, 35-knot winds there. You can get west of Cape Suckling, Kayak Island. 20-knot northeasterly winds there across Prince William Sound, and 25 to 30-knot northeasterly winds down the length of Cook Inlet with waves as high as 9-10 feet there at the entrance. Across Kodiak Island on Wednesday, we're looking at 40-45 knot northeast to north winds either side there of Kodiak Island, and as we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, strongest winds out of Bristol Bay, 35 knots northeasterly, and those winds still out of the northeast to north at 25 to 30 knots once you get down to Cold Bay and False Pass. For Thursday, winds continue at about 30 to 35 knots, so not quite as strong around Kodiak Island, and as we go down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, winds will generally be out of the northeast 25 to 30 knots, waves running 5 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side and 5 to 7 feet on the Bering side. The Aleutians on Wednesday generally will see easterly winds in the 25 to 30 knot range, waves 13 to 7 feet in the North Pacific side, 7 to maybe as high as 12, 13 feet between Nikolsky and Atka on the Bering side. And then for Thursday, northeast winds 25 knots over the eastern Bering, or I say Aleutians. And then once you get west of there, Adak, Atka toward the western Aleutians, 20 to 25 knot easterly winds. Along the southwest coast, still brisk 35 knot offshore north winds out of Bristol Bay, 20 knot northeast winds out of Kuskokwim Bay, east winds to 25 knots there in the Pribilov Islands. But at least some lighter winds because we have that high pressure ridge extending from the lower Yukon back toward northwest Canada. So we notice that winds not quite as strong there within Norton Sound or off the lower Yukon Delta, east-southeast 15 knots. And then come Thursday, those winds will be even further reduced because there is a weak high center out here off the coast, variable winds around 10 knots. Still, though, look for north winds out of Kuskokwim Bay to 30 knots, 25, 30 knots out of Bristol Bay as well. And there could be, in terms of maybe a little ice development, that'll probably have to wait till the latter half of the month as we get back into some colder air. Now, along the Bering Strait, winds will still be southerly, 25 to 30 knots, even 40 knots off of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. And then the winds southwest to west as high as 35 to 40 knots from Prudhoe Bay on over to Kaktovik. And for Thursday, we expect westerly winds to continue along the Arctic coast from Utqiagvik to Kaktovik, 25 to 30 knot westerly winds, whereas winds fall off. Southerly winds 15 to 20 knots across the lower Chukchi Sea. If there's any open water, waves could be a few feet. And then kind of a mixed bag of winds south of the Bering Strait, southeast to 15 knots there along Wales Port Clarence, but only 5 knots within within Norton Sound. And the north side of St. Lawrence Island is looking for winds to have some sort of southerly component at about 10 to 15 knots.